Hello everyone, and welcome to the next video for the same section that we are discussing and the same subsection, which is biochemistry. In the last video we discussed about cellular respiration. In this video we will be discussing about the process of photosynthesis, and this particular topic will be dealt in two videos. So this is a part 1 of the video, and in another video we will discuss part 2 of photosynthesis because it's a pretty big topic. Okay, but as you know, we are just discussing the key concept. Whatever you need to remember for the exam, we're not going to go into the details of anything. Okay, so coming to photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a process in which the plants, the green plants, make their own food by taking carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight. They make the food in the form of glucose and they liberate oxygen that we breathe in. So in this process, you're actually converting light energy into chemical energy. And as you know, this is usually done by autotrophs. Autotrophs are organisms that can make their own food, like plants. But please remember, photosynthesis is also carried out by some algae and some bacteria. So plants are not the only one who do photosynthesis. Okay, there are other organisms on this earth who do that. Anyways, so the photosynthesis, the whole process, can be divided into two phases. Phase 1 are light dependent reactions. They depend on light. Okay, so these particular reactions, they take place in organelles called chloroplasts. We'll discuss that in a little bit detail after a few slides. And what is the phase 1 doing? The light dependent reactions, they make ATP and NADPH molecules. And these ATP and NADPH molecules that you make in phase 1, which is the light dependent reactions, you use them in phase 2 to make your final product, which is glucose. So again, phase 1, light dependent reaction, you make ATP and NADPH. Phase 2, light independent reactions, you make use of that ATP and NADPH which you made in phase 1 to make the final product, which is glucose. Now the next thing is you have to know some components of chloroplast. Chloroplast, the whole function of it is to capture the light energy, which is sunlight, and to use it for making food for the plant. Now the chloroplast is a double membrane structure. You have an outer membrane and you have an inner membrane. Inside the chloroplast, you see the stack of these coins first. Each coin is called a thylakoid, and together the stack of coins is called a granum. Plural is grana. Sometimes you will see the word grana. Grana means more than one granum. Okay, so each is a granum. Together they are the grana. Now, there's something else. The fluid fills space here inside the chloroplast. We call that stroma. So please remember that thylakoids are where your light dependent reaction takes place, and your light independent reaction takes place in the stroma. So phase 1 in the thylakoid, phase 2 in stroma. This is an important concept. Please make sure you know it. Now going into the details of phase 1. So the phase 1, the first part of phase 1 is electron transport. So here, what happens? Look what happens in here. So before we go into that, there is something else that you should know. In photosynthesis, we talk about something called a photosystem. Okay, so photosystems are nothing but they contain pigments that absorb lights of different wavelengths. So there are two photosystems in photosynthesis. You have photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. So photosystem 1 absorbs light at around 700 nanometers. Photosystem 2 absorbs light at around 680 nanometers. So here, when you talk about phase 1, we don't talk about photosystem 1 first. We talk about photosystem 2. So we start from photosystem 2 here. And I will show you why. Because there are two types of phosphorylation. We'll go to the cyclic and acyclic in a bit. But right now, let's focus on the electron transport chain. Then we'll move on to that concept also later on. Okay. So here, this is the sunlight. And this is your photosystem 2, the green things. So what happens first? The light is absorbed by your photosystem because they contain chlorophyll. So when light is absorbed, they excite the electrons. So when the electrons are excited or activated, look what is happening. A water molecule is splitting into two H plus ions and half oxygen molecule. Okay, now, so, and then what is happening? The two H plus ions that you are making, they stay in the thylakoid space. Okay, and the oxygen that you are making is a waste product. Remember, what does the photosynthesis do? It takes carbon dioxide and it takes water and it makes oxygen as a product, and it also makes glucose. That will be seen in the next phase, not now. The final product glucose you will get not after phase 1, you'll get after phase 2. Okay, now what happens next? Now the electrons which are activated, they go on moving between one electron acceptor to the other. Okay, and then finally, so they go on, from one electron acceptor to the other electron acceptor. And when they are doing that, the protons or the H plus are continuously pumped inside the thylakoid space, this space. Okay, so finally the electrons go on from one electron acceptor. This is electron transport chain. The electron is transporting from one to the other, to the other, to the other, and finally they come to the electron acceptor called ferrodoxin. Ferrodoxin is present in photosystem 1. Like the photosystem 1 transfers the electrons to the, you can say it's almost the last in the series here. So the ferrodoxin takes an electron from photosystem 1 and then it transfers this electron to a molecule called NADP plus, okay, which along with the proton which is present here in this space, it makes something called NADPH. Remember, after phase 1 we make two components. We make ATP and we make NADPH. This is where you make NADPH. Now it's turn for you to make ATP. Okay, how do you make ATP? This is done by a process called chemiosmosis. So what is actually happening? Look at this picture. So when I said when you're splitting water, you are continuously having H plus inside the thylakoid, right? Inside the thylakoid space. So here in the electron transport chain, this H plus is released outside this phase. So you have H plus here and you have H plus outside too. This creates a concentration gradient. So there are more H plus inside the thylakoid space than it is outside. So what do you think will happen? So things always move from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. So your H plus will now start moving from the thylakoid space outside. Okay, here outside. So how do it move? So look at this. This is something which is called an ATP synthase. It's an enzyme. Okay, so how does the proton or the H plus moves? It moves through these channels, these enzymes. So when the H plus moves through this ATP synthase, they start making ATP. So from ADP, this enzyme can make ATP by making use of H plus. So now this is how you make ATP and you make NADPH from phase 1. Look, this is the whole process again. So here when light energy enters photosystem 2, the electron get activated. The water molecule splits up into two protons and half molecule of oxygen. This oxygen is released as a waste product. This H plus stays here and then this electron gets transferred from one electron carrier to the other. When it does, it starts pumping your H plus also outside. Okay, so you have H plus inside, you have H plus outside. Now this electron gets carried from photosystem 2 to photosystem 1 and finally it goes on to something called ferrodoxin, which is the final electron acceptor. Ferrodoxin then transfers this electron to NADP plus, with a proton ion. Together they make something called NADPH, and the H plus inside, since H plus is more inside the thylakoid space, so they want to go outside to a region of low concentration. They do that with the help of ATP synthase, which is an enzyme. What does it do? It takes the H plus or the proton from inside the thylakoid space to outside, and when this happens, ADP gets transferred to ATP. So these are your products after your first phase, which is NADPH and ATP. Now, the second phase is when you use this ATP and NADPH to make your final product, which is glucose. That will be discussed in the next video. Before that, you have to know something called the phosphorylation. There's two types. One is cyclic and one is non-cyclic. Cyclic means that something which starts from somewhere and it goes back. This is like a cycle. In the cyclic phosphorylation, we just make use of photosystem 1. There is no photosystem 2. So you have light, and then you know how, look how the electron is being transferred. You start from photosystem 1 and you go back to photosystem 1. But when you talk about non-cyclic phosphorylation, so both the photosystems are involved. Okay, so basically you start from photosystem 2, which we just discussed, and then you go to photosystem 1. So the example that we discussed right now was of non-cyclic phosphorylation. Okay, so here, please look here carefully. In cyclic, only photosystem 1 is involved. In non-cyclic, both are involved. In cyclic, water is not required, but non-cyclic, we just studied, we do the splitting of water, which is photolysis. Okay. In cyclic phosphorylation, oxygen is not involved. In non-cyclic, we just saw oxygen is involved as the waste product. Cyclic phosphorylation, you don't make NADPH, but in non-cyclic, we just made NADPH, remember? And then the last one is not very important. So here, why do the cells have to do cyclic phosphorylation then? Just to make additional ATP. Why do cells do non-cyclic? So that you get ATP and NADPH for phase 2 of photosynthesis. That's the purpose. So depending upon what the cell needs, they will either go for the cyclic or they will go for the non-cyclic phosphorylation. Finally, we will discuss one question and we'll end this video. So this question says, which of the following is true about cyclic phosphorylation? First of all, let's see. Lost electrons from photosystem 2 are replaced by electrons from photosystem 1. We just said that in the cyclic one, only photosystem 1 is involved. So there is no way that you will have photosystem 2 here. So this option is wrong. Look at the next option. NADPH and H plus are produced. So in cyclic, we do not make NADPH. It is not synthesized. So your option 2 is also wrong. Look at option D now. Photolysis of water molecules releases the electrons, blah, blah, blah. But we know that in cyclic phosphorylation, we don't use water at all. So we also know, if you know about cyclic phosphorylation, you know that option D is also wrong. So the only option which is suitable here is number C, which is photoactivated electrons pass along the electron transport chain before returning to photosystem 1. Returning means it's a cycle. This itself will tell you something is returning back. When something is cyclic, something has to return back. Okay, so your option is option C. That's your correct answer. With this, we end this video. Thank you so much for watching.